My older sister Linda married the factory director's son, Jason. She entered the office and secured the iron rice bowl everyone envied. I, Emma, married Eric, the poor technician who had always trailed after Linda, trying to please her, only to be laughed at by everyone for being useless. 10 years later, the factory was restructured. Jason failed miserably in business and squandered his family's wealth. Linda was laid off and had to rely on odd jobs to get by. Meanwhile, Eric quit his job to start his own business. With his skill in repairing appliances, he opened a small shop that grew steadily until he became a well-known entrepreneur in the city. When we returned to our hometown one day, we ran into Linda at the market. She was quarreling with someone over a few cents, her face worn and haggard. The moment she saw us step out of our newly bought car, she lost control and rushed toward me. "Didn't he say he only ever wanted me to live a good life? Why? Why did I suffer so much while you got all the benefits?" She grabbed me and dragged me toward the street, trying to die with me under a fully loaded truck. When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the time of our engagement. The truth was that I had died because Linda had pulled me with her straight into the truck. The out-of-control vehicle blared its desperate horn, and the last thing I saw was Linda's face, distorted to the extreme by jealousy and rage. Why? Jason clearly said he would marry no one but me, that he just wanted me to live a good life. Why did I suffer so much, only for you to take it all? Her furious, hoarse voice stabbed at my heart like a poisoned knife. The next time I opened my eyes, I was sitting in our small living room. My mother's sharp, exasperated voice filled my ears. "Linda, are you feverish and talking nonsense? Why won't you marry Jason, the director's son? Why must you insist on marrying that Eric? Do you even know what his family is like? 5 people squeezed into that shabby dorm building. His monthly pay can't even buy you a new dress." I suddenly came back to myself, staring at the familiar scene before me, at Linda crying bitterly on the sofa across from me, tears streaming down her face, my heart pounding wildly. I had been reborn, back to the day before the two of us were to be engaged 10 years ago. In my past life, after Mom scolded her, Linda had smugly lifted her chin and said, "Mom, of course I'll marry Jason. Who would turn down a good life? My sister Emma is soft. Marrying someone honest like Eric suits her just fine." But now Linda clung to Mom's arm, shaking her head desperately through her tears. "Mom, I want to marry Eric. So what if Jason is the director's son? He's a lazy good-for-nothing. I don't like him. Eric treats me well, and I know he's going to succeed one day. Mom, believe me." I lowered my gaze, hiding the cold glint in my eyes. So I wasn't the only one who had come back. My dear sister had returned with her past life memories too. In that life, Linda married Jason with great pride, entered the factory office, and lived the life everyone envied. I, Emma, married Eric, the technician mocked for being poor and incompetent, the boy who, when we were younger, always followed after Linda, giving her all his attention and affection. 10 years later, after the restructuring, Jason's ventures collapsed. Linda was laid off and forced to sell vegetables at the market, while Eric, with his clever hands, grew from repairing appliances to running his own company and factory, eventually becoming a renowned entrepreneur in the city. The day we went home to visit family in our brand new Santana, we saw Linda at the market, red-faced and quarreling over a few cents worth of wilted vegetables. When she saw me step out of the car, radiant and well-dressed, the jealousy and bitterness in her eyes nearly turned solid. That was how the terrible accident happened. Now she was back as well. She thought she had grasped the key to future wealth and couldn't wait to steal the fortune that had belonged to me in the last life. Mom continued trying to persuade her. "My silly girl, has Eric bewitched you? If you marry into the director's family, you'll work in the office and one day be a leader's wife. That's a comfortable life. Why throw it away?" Then Mom's eyes turned to me, her tone firm and unquestioning. "Since your sister doesn't know what's good for her, you must. Tomorrow, you'll marry Jason." I lifted my head, letting a meek, slightly aggrieved expression show on my face. "Mom, I'll listen to you." The instant Linda saw me give in, she wiped her tears away, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. She walked up to me, patted my shoulder, and, with her superiority barely hidden in her voice, said, "Little sister." "It's a grievance for you, little sister," Linda said, feigning pity. But don't worry. Jason isn't a bad man. He just likes to play around. He's not like our Eric, who's always ambitious. She deliberately emphasized the words our Eric, as if the future riches of heaven and earth were now reserved for me. She thought she had stolen my fortune, yet she didn't understand that Eric's success was never because of his name. It was because, in my previous life, he had me, Emma, as his wife. That blessing was mine to give. If she wanted it so badly, then let her take it. I wanted to see if, without me as the catalyst, she could still shape Eric into the future business giant he would become. In the end, my mother couldn't change Linda's mind. That wasn't surprising. From childhood, Linda had always been the center of the family. She was pretty, sweet-tongued, and knew how to act spoiled, keeping our parents wrapped around her little finger. I, by contrast, was quiet and reserved, like a shadow. In their eyes, Linda was the pearl to be cherished in the palm, while I was just the backdrop. Emma, the dutiful, self-effacing daughter. To ensure she could marry Eric, Linda reused the tricks from her past life. First, she mysteriously claimed she had dreamed of an immortal who told her that Eric was destined for greatness, a dragon waiting in the abyss, and that he would surely achieve great things. My parents didn't believe her, dismissing it as silly talk. But then she made another prediction. She said that the next day, Master Wong in the machine workshop would have an accident, injuring his fingers due to an operational mistake. My father, who was the workshop supervisor, grew uneasy and repeatedly warned Master Wong to be careful. Yet the following day, Master Wong, distracted after a quarrel with his wife, did lose half a finger to the machine. That incident changed everything. My parents, though firm materialists, were shaken to their core when it happened before their very eyes. My mother clutched Linda's hand, her voice trembling. "Linda, did you really dream this?" With a lofty, knowing look, Linda said, "Mom, this is all heaven's will. Eric and I are fated. Even the heavens have sent me dreams." My parents exchanged a look, their doubt turning to awe. They were convinced Linda was blessed, guided by destiny. From that day, the family threw themselves into preparing for Linda's marriage to Eric with joy and excitement. As for me, Mom pulled me aside and gave me endless instructions. Once I married into the Zhao family, I must serve my in-laws well, take care of Jason, and never bring shame to the family. Linda finally got her wish. She looked at me with unconcealed triumph and mock sympathy. "Emma, you'd better learn how to be a good wife. The director's family has far more rules than ours. You're such a quiet little gourd. You'd better watch out, or you'll be bullied with no one to cry to." I kept my head down, my eyes red, pretending I was about to burst into tears. "I know, Linda, I'll be careful." Her spirit soared. With a flourish, she slid a silver bracelet off her wrist and pressed it into my hand. "Since you're marrying in my place, this will be my compensation to you. Just settle in and enjoy the days of being a rich wife." With her hips swaying, she strutted away in delight. The moment she disappeared, I could no longer suppress the curve tugging at my lips. Did she pity me? For what? For marrying into the wealthiest family in the factory? Or for having to put up with a useless husband, only to hold in my hands, within a few years, several properties worth millions in the future? Oh, Linda, you'll never understand. Eric's success wasn't born of so-called divine guidance. It came from his relentless dedication, his tireless work, and the unwavering support he had at his side. In my past life, I guarded his blueprints and parts like treasures. But in this life, in your hands, they'll become nothing more than piles of worthless scrap. Linda and I were married on the same day. In the late 1980s, the factory compound wedding was the grandest spectacle anyone could hope to see. Early that morning, Jason's wedding procession arrived at our gate. A gleaming black Santana with a giant red ribbon on the hood, followed by 2 Jeeps. At a time when even a bicycle was considered a luxury, that kind of display was earth-shaking. Everyone in the compound, young and old, whether they had work that day or not, crowded on both sides of the road to watch. It was, after all, the director's family. "It's really grand," the neighbors whispered. "Those 2 daughters of the Lin family sure are blessed." Isn't that the truth? One step, and they've soared to the top. Dressed in a bright red wedding gown, I, Emma, was led by Jason's hand into the shiny black sedan amid the envious murmurs of the crowd. Through the car window, I saw Linda standing among the onlookers. Her face was ugly with fury, her complexion so pale it was almost green. Her lips pressed so hard they nearly bled. Even if she knew Eric would one day become the richest man, the spotlight of this moment belonged to me alone. Sometimes a woman's jealousy can't be restrained, not even by rebirth. Not long after Eric arrived. He had no car, just a well-polished bicycle, its handlebars tied with a red flower and a hot water bottle dangling beneath it, his entire fortune. He pedaled up to Linda, sweaty and grinning a little too anxiously. The crowd burst into laughter. Ha! Eric actually dares to marry a factory girl like Linda. She must be blind, passing over the director's son to choose a poor boy like him. Linda's face went red, then pale, then red again, before she forced herself to climb onto the back of Eric's bicycle with a stiff smile. As she passed my car window, she muttered again, "Little sister, this heaven-sent fortune is yours to enjoy," though the bitterness in her tone was so thick I could taste it even through the glass. I nodded gently and gave her the meekest, sweetest smile I could manage. She felt satisfied, and so did I. The Zhao family's bridal home was a spacious 3-bedroom apartment allocated to the factory leaders, fully furnished with appliances, the floors waxed so bright they reflected shadows. Eric's marital home, meanwhile, was a single tiny room carved out of the dormitory, where one bed and one table already left no space to turn around. That night, Jason drank heavily and had to be carried back by his friends. He collapsed on the bed and passed out instantly. I didn't mind at all. In fact, the peace suited me. Closing the door, I opened one of my dowry chests and took out a small ledger. It held every bit of private savings I had managed to squirrel away over the years, 326 yuan and 50 cents. Not much, but in those days it was a respectable sum. Then I began to tally the Zhao family's wealth in my mind. The apartment from the factory, the family savings, my mother-in-law's gold jewelry, and, in just a few years, that southern coastal city called Shenzhen, poised to rise and soar. Linda thought she had stolen a man from me, but what she had actually given up was an entire era. Life in the Zhao household was better than I had imagined. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Wang, the factory director's wife, was the typical cadre's lady. She wasn't educated, but she'd spent her whole life basking in admiration and envy. She was a little vain, but not malicious. With my sweet words and diligent hands, I quickly won her over, until she was calling me affectionately every day. My father-in-law, Mr. Zhao, the factory director, was usually stern and serious, but he seemed satisfied with me as a daughter-in-law. After all, I came from a decent family, honest and proper. The hardest part was my new husband, Jason. He was nothing but a spoiled boy, given a cushy post at the factory, spending his days drinking and playing cards with idle friends, only coming home after dark. In the first few days of our marriage, Jason treated me with a semblance of politeness, but soon his true nature showed. I never quarreled with him, though. I knew very well that clashing head-on with someone like Jason was useless. The trick was to stroke his ego. He loved face, so I gave him face. When he bragged in front of his friends, I poured drinks and added food, gazing at him with admiration. When he lost money gambling and came home sighing, I took out my own secret savings to hand him, murmuring gently, "It's all right, you'll win it back next time." Jason ate this up. He started thinking he had married well after all. A beautiful wife with a soft temperament who always sided with him and made him look good in front of others. Slowly, he even began listening to my words here and there. Once the groundwork was laid, I knew it was time to begin my plan to change him. That evening, over family dinner, while serving dishes to my father-in-law and mother-in-law, while casually serving dishes, I brought up a piece of news I had read in the paper. "Dad, Mom, today I read that there's a place in the south called Shenzhen. It's developing really fast. Lots of people are going there to do business and make a fortune." My mother-in-law, Mrs. Wang, curled her lip with disdain. "That little fishing village? What kind of future could it possibly have? Only drifters with no real jobs would go there. We have iron rice bowls. We'd never go suffer like that." That was the prevailing thought for most people back then. I smiled gently and said, "I think the same. But the paper also said that land is very cheap there right now. With the cost of just one apartment from our factory, we could buy a huge plot and build our own building. If our family bought a house there, then later, when Jason goes on a business trip to the south, he'd have a place to stay. And just think, how impressive would it sound if we could say the Zhao family owns a house in Shenzhen? The word impressive struck right at the Zhao family's soft spot. Jason's eyes lit up first. Yeah, Dad, that would really give me face. When I hang out with my buddies, I could say my family has property in Shenzhen. Let's see who still dares call me a freeloader. My father-in-law, Mr. Zhao, frowned. He thought it sounded unreliable. But something in my words and Jason's excitement planted a seed of doubt in his heart. Competition for the director's position was fierce. He needed tangible achievements and unique talking points to secure his authority. If he could casually hint during a cadre meeting that he had the foresight to already invest in a special economic zone, it would give him prestige and strengthen his standing. I noticed the flicker of change on his face and knew I had him. My goal wasn't to save Jason, nor the Zhao family. I just wanted to use them to carve out a safe, prosperous future for myself and for the child still hidden in my womb. Half a month later came the return visit day. Jason went out of his way to borrow the factory's Santana, driving me home in great style. The moment the car stopped under the shabby dorm building, neighbors crowded around. My mother's face bloomed with joy as she grabbed my hand and proudly showed me off. Look at this. This is my son-in-law, Jason, personally driving Emma back in style. Jason basked in the praise, his head practically floating. He opened the trunk and hauled out bags of cigarettes, liquor, candy, and tea, earning a chorus of admiration. Not long after we entered the house, Linda and Eric returned as well. They came on foot. Eric was carrying gifts too, but compared to Jason's lavish offerings, his looked pitifully modest. Seeing Jason inside, Eric's whole posture grew uneasy. He didn't even know where to put his hands. Linda's expression was sour, though she forced a smile as they sat down. The meal was strained. My mother, who usually favored Linda, was now effusively warm toward Jason, piling food into his bowl and asking about his work at the factory. Toward Eric, she was indifferent, barely responding. Linda, clearly displeased, started loudly defending him. Don't look down on Eric just because he's a technician now. He's smart. She dropped a piece of meat into his bowl and raised her voice. You don't understand the things he comes up with. One day he'll definitely outshine Jason. Jason, flushed from drinking, parent Fort smirked lazily. Future success isn't about talking big. I sit in on my dad's meetings all the time. The real future is economics, not tinkering with scrap metal. Linda's face turned red with anger. Eric tugged at her sleeve, whispering, Linda, let it go. But she shook him off and snapped even louder. Am I wrong? You just don't have the ability. If you did, you'd show them right now what you can do. The atmosphere at the table plummeted to ice. My father tried to smooth things over with awkward words, while my mother's face darkened with irritation. I kept my head down, eating quietly, though inside I was sneering. In my previous life, Linda had always belittled me in front of others to elevate herself. In this life, she used the same trick on Eric, thinking it was motivation. She had no idea how humiliating that was for a man who was already shy and insecure. I couldn't help but notice Eric's hands that had long worked with oil and machines, the nails blackened with grease. And beside him sat Linda, newly married, her nails painted a glossy bright red. Those two pairs of hands looked so mismatched, like two puzzle pieces forced together that would never fit. That return visit ended in discord, with Linda's tears and complaints and Eric's silence. On the way back, Jason was still grumbling under his breath. Jason grumbled all the way home. Linda must be out of her mind, treating a useless man like Eric as if he were some treasure. I gazed quietly out the window at the streets rushing past and said softly, she's just unwilling to accept it. She can't stand that the potential stock she chose looks worthless compared to reality. And this is only the beginning. Linda's dream of becoming a goddess, or rather the richest man's wife, soon turned into action. She started pressuring Eric every day to invent something. Relying on bits and pieces of memory from her previous life, she began describing household appliances that wouldn't exist for years to come. Eric, don't you tinker with circuit boards? Can't you make a pot that produces hot water with the press of a button without having to boil it? And what about a box that heats food by itself once you put it inside? Oh, and a round little dish that sweeps the floor on its own. I'm telling you, if we make these things, we'll get rich. What she described, of course, were the future electric kettle, microwave oven, and robotic vacuum. But all she had were vague ideas, no principles, no real explanations. Eric listened in confusion, shaking his head. Linda, what you're saying just isn't realistic. How is it not realistic? Linda exploded instantly. I don't care what you say, the gods told me this in my dreams. If you can't make it, it's only because you're incompetent. Finally, backed into a corner and unwilling to argue against her so-called divine revelations, Eric reluctantly revealed what he had actually been working on in secret. He pulled out a hand-drawn circuit diagram and some scavenged parts from the junkyard. Linda, what you're asking for is too difficult. But I've been working on this lately. He carefully spread the papers on the table, explaining with rare passion. I optimized the circuit to double the signal reception and make it more energy efficient. If I can build it, it'll be better than the Hongson brand on the market. In my previous life, this improved radio had been Eric's first real achievement, the patent that earned him his first fortune. But Linda only gave it a cursory glance before her face twisted with disdain. This? Eric, I asked you for groundbreaking inventions, and you show me this broken radio? How much could this even be worth? Can it get us out of this shabby dorm? Can it buy me a new dress? Her anger grew the more she spoke, convinced he was stalling, wasting her so-called foresight. I don't want to see this trash. With a furious sweep, she knocked the diagrams and components onto the floor. The circuit blueprints Eric had stayed up night after night to perfect scattered everywhere, and a rare semiconductor tube rolled under the bed with a sharp clink. Eric's eyes turned red in an instant. He shot to his feet and for the first time shouted at Linda. What are you doing? Dropping to his knees, he scrambled frantically to gather the scattered parts and papers like they were priceless treasures. Linda froze for a moment at his outburst, then lashed out in turn. What am I doing? I'm helping you, you ungrateful failure. I've pointed out the path to fortune, and you're still clinging to this worthless junk. Do you plan to rot in this dump forever and drag me down with you? That night, for the first time, loud quarrels spilled out of their new home. Eric's painstaking work had been treated like garbage, and Linda's so-called good intentions were nothing but humiliation to him. Neither of them realized that what Linda had thrown under the bed wasn't just a spare part, it was their once bright future. While Linda and Eric tore each other apart over junk, I was already walking the path of squandering. After much coaxing, persistence, and planting ideas, my father-in-law, Mr. Zhao, finally made his decision. He scraped together the family's entire savings and even borrowed from old comrades, handing over 50,000 yuan to Jason and me so we could go to Shenzhen. Before we left, my mother-in-law clutched my hand with tears in her eyes. Emma, this is our family's life savings. You have to be careful. I nodded solemnly. Mom, don't worry. In the late 1980s, taking 50,000 yuan to buy property in an unknown fishing village seemed like pure madness. After we left, gossip swirled endlessly through the factory compound. Did you hear? Old Zhao's family gave their money to the daughter-in-law. She's going to waste it all in Shenzhen. That quiet second daughter of the Lin family isn't so simple after all. She's got plenty of tricks up her sleeve. People said I had my in-laws wrapped around my little finger, that I was nothing but a spendthrift. Hearing these rumors only made Linda even more smug. When we ate together at my parents' house, she never missed a chance to mock me. Mom, look at Emma. She has no sense at all. Instead of living a good, stable life, she's running around making trouble. Just watch. One day she'll bankrupt the Zhao family. My mother sighed and shook her head, believing I was foolish and a disgrace to the Lin family. I paid no attention to any of it. Jason and I endured a 3-day, 2-night train ride in the old green cars before we finally arrived in Shenzhen, a place of swirling dust and endless construction sites. Jason's face went pale at the sight. Emma, this is the land of gold you were talking about? It's nothing compared to our factory compound. I grabbed his hand and pointed to an expanse of newly marked land, my eyes glowing with certainty. Jason, trust me, in less than 10 years, This place will be 100 times more prosperous than our factory, more prosperous than our entire city. Every inch of land we buy now will turn to gold in the future. My conviction infected him, and in the end, we spent the 50,000 yuan on 2 new apartments and 3 storefronts in Luohu and Fujian, which at that time were still considered suburbs. When the paperwork was done, every cent was gone. On the train ride home, Jason was still dazed. "Emma, did we really do the right thing?" Resting my head on his shoulder, I looked out the window and answered with unwavering certainty, "Yes, we did the right thing." Back home, I didn't rest. I knew the factory's restructuring was inevitable, and Jason's identity as the director's son would soon be worthless. I began encouraging him to learn a real trade. "Jason, don't you love cars? You're always hanging around with the drivers. Why not learn auto repair from them?" Jason shook his head furiously. "Me? A factory director's son becoming a car mechanic? That would be humiliating." I coaxed him patiently. "Why would that be shameful? Think about it. As life improves, won't every household want a car? And the more cars there are, the more repairs they'll need. By then, you'll be Master Zhao, the mechanic everyone relies on. Won't that be far more respectable than wasting your days at the factory?" Jason repeated the title slowly, Master Zhao. And his eyes began to brighten. Vain as he was, he let my words sway him once again. He started spending his time at the auto shop, not drinking and gambling anymore, but actually picking up a wrench and learning the craft. His clothes grew dirty with oil, but for the first time, I saw light in his eyes. To Linda, however, all of this looked like foolishness. In her mind, I was pushing my husband into another dead end, while she didn't realize she had already thrown away Eric's dreams. I, on the other hand, was paving a golden road for my husband and my family. Cracks, once formed, only grow deeper. Finally, the conflict between Linda and Eric exploded amid the daily grind of married life. Eric still wanted to continue his radio research, but after Linda's last outburst, several crucial parts had been broken. Those parts couldn't be found in town. He would have to travel to the provincial capital's electronics market. With travel expenses and the parts, it would cost at least 50 yuan. For their family, with little savings and Eric earning just over 80 yuan a month, this was a huge sum. He tried to discuss it with Linda, hoping she would contribute some of her private savings to tide him over. Her face instantly darkened. "Eric, you're still hung up on that broken radio? I already told you it's worthless. Can't you focus on something practical?" Eric grew anxious. "Linda, it's not junk. This is my life's work. If I can just finish it." "Finish it for what?" Linda cut him off coldly. "Will it make you a workshop supervisor? Will the factory give us a new apartment for it?" From the drawer, she pulled out 2 bottles of Mao Tai and 2 cartons of Zhonghua cigarettes. They were part of her dowry, gifts from her family that she had never dared to touch. She shoved them toward him. "Here, take these and give them to your supervisor, Mr. Li. Say a few sweet words, ask him to transfer you to a better post. The best would be procurement. That's where the real money is." Eric stared at the cigarettes and liquor, his face flushing red. "Linda, I'm not going. I don't like this sort of thing. All I want is to work quietly and focus on my research." Linda slammed the gifts down on the table with a loud crack. "Eric, you're hopeless. Thick-headed and useless. Do you even know what era this is? What good is just having technical skills? You need connections, don't you get it?" Under Linda's relentless pressure, Eric finally caved. Carrying what he felt was an unbearably heavy burden, he knocked on Supervisor Li's door. But he wasn't built for this sort of thing. When he saw the man, his words tangled in his throat. Blushing furiously, he set the gifts on the table, stammered out, "Supervisor Li, please take care of me," and fled. But the attempt backfired. Supervisor Li thought Eric was trying to threaten him, holding some kind of leverage. The very next day at the workshop meeting, Li hinted broadly about such unhealthy trends, shaming Eric in front of all his coworkers. Eric lost face completely. When he returned home, for the first time, he didn't argue with Linda. He just sat silently on the edge of the bed, chain-smoking one cigarette after another, until the room was thick with smoke, making Linda cough. "Look at you. You can't even give a gift properly. How did I end up marrying such a worthless man?" Her scolding pierced Eric's heart like an awl. He suddenly lifted his head, staring at the woman he had once admired all through his youth. His eyes were filled with exhaustion and alienation. And then he remembered, long ago, when he was still a quiet young technician tinkering with a broken part in the workshop. Everyone else had mocked him for wasting his time, except for one girl who had silently stood behind him, watching him sweat. She had quietly handed him a clean handkerchief and a bottle of cool water. That girl was me, Emma. At the time, he had thought me too quiet, too dull, far less dazzling than Linda. But now, he missed that quietness more than anything. For the first time, he began to doubt his choice. 5 years slipped by. In that time, my life with Jason had transformed completely. Shenzhen, that once little fishing village, had soared just as I predicted, growing at an unbelievable pace. The apartments and storefronts we bought back then had skyrocketed in value many times over. At first, my in-laws refused to believe it, until I came back with rental contracts signed by the agency and placed thick stacks of rent money into their hands. Only then did they truly accept the truth. From that moment on, my position in the Zhao family was like that of a living god of wealth. My in-laws listened to my every word and treated me with near reverence. They bragged to everyone about their good fortune in having such a far-sighted daughter-in-law. Jason, too, was no longer the idle young man he had once been. His little auto repair stall grew into a full repair shop with over a dozen workers. As more and more people bought cars, his business flourished. He worked from dawn until late at night. Tired, yes, but earning more than any cadre at the factory. With work came purpose, and his whole demeanor changed. He stopped drinking and gambling, devoting himself fully to the business. He grew steady, responsible, even mature. Our son was now 4 years old, bright and lively. Jason often held him and sighed, "Emma, if it weren't for you, I would have wasted my whole life." Meanwhile, our old Red Star machinery factory was inevitably sliding toward decline in the tide of the times. The equipment was outdated, orders dwindled, profits shrank each year. Rumors spread about restructuring and layoffs, and everyone was on edge. As for Linda and Eric, they were still living in that shabby dormitory. Over those 5 years, Eric had completely given up on his research. Under Linda's daily complaints and constant belittling, the light in his eyes finally went out. He became nothing more than an ordinary worker, just going to and from work, eating and sleeping in silence. Linda's temper grew worse by the day. Her dream of becoming the wife of a tycoon never came true. On the contrary, she watched with her own eyes as my life grew better and better. The jealousy and bitterness inside her nearly consumed her. She no longer placed her hopes on Eric's inventions, but pinned everything on the so-called iron rice bowl. She believed that as long as she kept her job at the factory, there was still a chance to turn things around. But once again, she had bet on the wrong horse. She and I stood at the same crossroads, but he chose the path that seemed smooth, yet led straight to a cliff, while I chose the road full of thorns that led to the light. When the great tide of the era crashed down, it was clear at a glance who was standing tall and who was being swept away. In 1995, Red Star Machinery Factory officially announced its restructuring. The news was like a bomb exploding in the quiet compound. The iron rice bowl shattered. More than half of the workers would be laid off. At once, cries, curses, and sighs filled the entire factory yard. Many had spent their whole lives there and knew nothing but how to tighten screws. For them, leaving the factory was like throwing a fish into the desert. They simply could not survive. Our family had been prepared, so the impact was minimal. My father-in-law retired early with a generous pension, spending his days raising flowers and birds, enjoying peace in his old age. Jason had long since left the factory, his repair shop thriving, his earnings dwarfing any factory salary. But Linda and Eric weren't so lucky. Both of their names appeared on the very first layoff list. That day, the announcement was posted on the factory's bulletin board. Surrounded by a crowd, Linda pushed her way through from top to bottom, and when she saw her own name alongside Eric's, she was stunned. All of her pride, all of her hopes, had come from that one identity as a factory worker's wife. Now it was gone, and panic consumed her. She rushed home, where Eric was silently wiping down his tools, wrenches, pliers, screwdrivers, placing each carefully into his toolbox, the only property he truly owned. Linda exploded hysterically. Eric, you useless waste. I told you long ago to build connections, to curry favor with the leaders, and you refused. Now look, we're both laid off. Are you satisfied? How are we supposed to survive now?" Eric didn't answer. He just kept polishing each tool with quiet precision. Linda grew even angrier at his silence. "Say something. Have you gone mute? What about the promises you made me? You said you'd give me a good life. Is this what you call a good life?" At last, Eric stopped. He lifted his head and looked at the woman in front of him, her face twisted by rage. His eyes were calm, as still as dead water. Softly he spoke. "Linda." Then came 5 words. "Let's get a divorce." Those words struck harder than any shouting match. Linda froze, unable to believe her ears. This man who had obeyed her for 5 years, this man she had cursed as worthless, was asking for a divorce. What did you say?" "I said, let's get a divorce," Eric repeated, his voice utterly steady. "I've had enough of this home." With that, he snapped the toolbox shut, lifted it, and walked out of the house without looking back. Linda collapsed to the ground, staring at the empty doorway, finally breaking down in loud sobs. She couldn't understand how things had come to this. She had believed she held the right answers, so why had she still failed so completely? Where had she gone wrong in this life? The double blow of layoff and divorce destroyed her. She became a jobless drifter. At first, she tried to rely on her parents, but they were old, their small pensions unable to support her endless dependence. Very quickly, she hit a dead end. For the sake of survival, she had to swallow her pride and take on odd jobs. She washed dishes in restaurants, carried bricks on construction sites, and sold vegetables in the market. Under the scorching sun and harsh winds, heavy labor quickly ruined the beauty she had once been so proud of. Her hands grew rough, and her face began to show wrinkles and dark spots. She looked 10 years older than her actual age. The once bright, showy factory flower, Linda, had completely disappeared, replaced by a rough, sharp-tongued woman who would argue half a day with someone over a few cents at the market. After leaving Linda, Eric really did rely on that old toolbox of his to start a small roadside stand repairing household appliances, televisions, radios, washing machines. At that time, these were expensive luxuries. No one could bear to throw them away when they broke. Eric's skills were solid, his fees were fair, and he was an honest man. Soon he earned a bit of a reputation. People would rather walk a few extra miles just to bring their broken appliances to him. When Linda heard about it, she felt nothing but shame. To her, this was the lowest of the low, a disgrace that made her lose face entirely. She even stormed to his stall once, shouting that he was just a filthy repairman who would never amount to anything. Eric only looked at her in silence. In his eyes there was no love, no hatred, only emptiness. Later, Linda heard that our family had bought several storefronts downtown, and that just the rental income alone was over 10,000 yuan a month. Jason's repair shop had expanded again, he had bought a new car, and we were preparing to acquire land on the outskirts for a new factory. That news became the final straw that broke her. The venom of jealousy gnawed at her heart again. She couldn't understand why, when she had held what she thought was the script for the future, had her life still collapsed into a pile of mud. Why had I, Emma, the fool who married a useless man, ended up living the life she dreamed of? She refused to accept it. She convinced herself that I had stolen the life that should have been hers, that I had ruined everything. That hatred grew like a seed buried deep in her heart, sprouting into a poisonous tree. She started haunting our neighborhood like a ghost, lurking in corners, staring at me, at Jason, at our car, at the happy smiles of me with my husband and our child. I knew she was losing her mind. Just like in my past life, when she dragged me toward the truck, the storm was about to break. One day I drove downtown to check on the renovations of our new shops. Jason sat in the passenger seat, humming cheerfully. At an intersection, the light turned red and I stopped. Casually turning my head, I caught sight of a familiar figure on the roadside. It was Eric. He was crouched on a small stool with a plastic sheet spread before him. On it were tools and half-disassembled parts. A crooked sign stood in front of him, reading, "Professional repairs, TVs, refrigerators, washing machines." It was rush hour, people streaming past without giving him a second glance. He wore a faded, threadbare work uniform, hands blackened with grease, hair a messy tangle. His head was bent, focused on tightening a screw. The sunlight cast his thin, hunched shadow long across the pavement. I watched him, my heart heavy with emotion. In my previous life, this was how he had started too. But back then, I was with him. I had brought him meals, handed him water, sat beside him as he worked through the night, drawing blueprints. I had helped assemble his very first improved radio, and his first patent payment had been placed into my hands. But in this life, there was no one beside him. He had started too late, and the road ahead was far too hard. Isn't that Eric? Jason had noticed too, surprised. Over the years, Jason had transformed completely. No longer the arrogant, spoiled boy he used to be. He pushed open the car door and walked over. "Master Eric," he greeted politely. Eric's head snapped up. When he saw us, panic flickered across his eyes. He instinctively tried to hide his greasy hands behind his back, his lips moving but no words coming out. "How's business?" Jason asked kindly, pulling a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and offering him one. Eric quickly waved his hand, refusing. With his head lowered, Eric muttered softly, It's okay, just enough to get by." Jason patted him on the shoulder. "As long as you've got skill, you'll never starve. Work hard. If you ever need help, come find me at the shop." With that, he returned to the car. The light turned green. I started the engine, and in the rearview mirror I saw Eric still standing there, staring blankly in our direction as we drove away. His expression was complicated, part envy, part disappointment, and a trace of regret I couldn't quite understand. I knew he had probably realized what it was he had given up back then. But life offers no what-ifs. Once you choose the wrong road, there's no turning back. Jason's well-meant kindness was twisted by Linda into nothing more than naked humiliation. Somehow, she heard about it, and that very night, she burst into our house like a madwoman. We were sitting around the dinner table, laughing and enjoying a peaceful meal when the front door slammed open with a crash. She stormed in like a ghost, her eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled. "Emma, get out here," she screamed. My mother-in-law jumped up, startled and scolded. "Linda, what nonsense is this? Have you gone mad?" But Linda ignored her completely. She locked her burning gaze on me, as if she wanted to tear me apart. "You knew, didn't you? You knew Eric would be useless? You knew Jason's family would be rich? You gave Eric to me on purpose, dumped that mess on me, just so you could laugh at me, didn't you?" Her voice was shrill and piercing. The room fell silent in shock. Jason and my in-laws were utterly confused, not understanding what she meant by "gave him to me." Only I remained calm, setting down my chopsticks and saying evenly, "Linda, the path was your choice." "It was my choice?" She threw back her head and laughed maniacally. "No, it was your design. If you had married Eric, he would already be successful, right? If it had been you, he'd be driving cars, living in a big house, the boss of his own company, and I would be the boss's wife. Why? Why was it me who chose him first, but you got all the good fortune in the end?" Her words carried too much meaning. Jason frowned. "Linda, what nonsense are you spouting? What do you mean you chose him first? Weren't you the one who cried and swore you'd only marry Eric?" But Linda couldn't say the truth, that she had been reborn. All she could do was vent every drop of hatred at me. Pointing at me, she screamed to Jason, "It's her. She's the one who ruined me. Jason, don't be fooled by her. This woman is full of schemes. She knew all along you'd be successful, and that's why she clung to you." I looked at her deranged face and smiled faintly. "Sister, have you forgotten? You were the one who said Eric was destined for greatness. You were the one who claimed marrying Jason was a sacrifice for me. And you were the one who said all that fortune was mine to enjoy. What's wrong? Don't you want to admit it now?" Each of my words cut into her like a blade. Linda's face turned deathly pale. She pointed at me, her lips trembling, but no sound came out. At last she let out a scream, spun around, and ran into the night. The living room was left in utter silence. Jason and my in-laws stared at me with searching eyes. I met their gaze calmly. Deep inside, I knew there would be no more secrets in this family from that night onward. But it didn't matter. By now, I no longer needed to rely on anyone. After that scene, the last bit of bond between Linda and Eric snapped completely. That very night, Eric packed up all his belongings, bought a train ticket heading south, and left cleanly without a single word. Linda lost her final support and became nothing but a laughingstock in the factory. She never came to trouble me again. It was as if her spirit had been sucked out of her. She grew silent, withdrawn, a hollow shell of the woman she once was. My parents worried themselves sick over Linda, wanting her to move back home, but she refused. She stayed alone in that empty dorm room, surviving on odd jobs and whatever support my parents could spare. Meanwhile, I turned my focus to something new. After the factory restructuring, many laid-off workers were struggling. Most of them were honest, hard-working people, skilled and willing to endure hardship, but they lacked opportunities and startup capital. So, under the name of Jason's Repair Shop, I set up a small mutual aid fund, dedicated to providing tiny, interest-free loans to those who wanted to start small businesses of their own. The amounts weren't large, just 1,000 or 2,000 yuan, but to them it was like giving coal in the middle of winter. Some used the money to set up breakfast stalls by the roadside. Others bought tricycles to peddle vegetables through the neighborhoods. A few experienced craftsmen pooled together and opened a tiny hardware workshop. My actions caused quite a stir in the factory community. People said the director's family had produced a living bodhisattva. At first, Jason didn't understand. He thought I was throwing money away. I explained to him, "Jason, part of the money we earn comes from the dividends of this era. We're only returning a small portion of those dividends to the people of this era, the uncles and aunts who grew up with us. And besides, isn't this also building a good reputation for you and for our business?" Jason finally understood. Not only did he fully support me, he also actively joined in. Using his own connections and resources, he found ways to help these small entrepreneurs. When his shop needed parts, he went first to the old craftsman's workshop. When the factory canteen needed suppliers, he recommended the woman who ran the breakfast stall. Over time, Jason's reputation grew. People no longer called him just the factory director's spoiled son, but respectfully addressed him as Boss Zhao. One evening he told me sincerely, "Emma, thank you. Without you, I'd be nothing." I smiled and held his hand. In this life I hadn't only changed my own fate, I had changed his too. We never became the kind of tycoons Eric had in my past life, but we supported each other, worked steadily, and found our own value. This life might not have been grand or legendary, but it was steady enough. Happy enough. A few more years passed, and our life became rich and peaceful. Jason's repair shop had grown into the largest auto service company in the city. The rents from my properties rose steadily. We bought a bigger home, and our son entered the best elementary school. My parents moved in with us to enjoy their later years. Watching us, they often sighed, saying it was pure luck, that I was just a blind cat who stumbled onto a dead mouse. I only smiled, never explaining. I knew the truth. None of this came from luck. It was all built by my own choices, step by step. As for Linda, she eventually moved back into our parents' old house, living alone. I heard her temper grew more and more peculiar, and she rarely interacted with others. Sometimes we sent her money or necessities, but she either refused outright or accepted them in silence. Between us, there was nothing left but estrangement. The sister who had once been as radiant as a summer flower had withered in the cold winter of her own making. One weekend afternoon, the weather was lovely. Jason drove our new Audi, taking me and our son to a farmhouse in the suburbs for a weekend getaway. As the car rolled slowly past the city's busiest market, the clamor of voices filled the air. Suddenly, a sharp female voice cut through the noise and into my ears. "These cabbage leaves are rotten, and you dare sell them for 50 cents a pound? Why don't you just rob people instead?" I instinctively turned my head. There, in a faded gray coat with hair dull and yellowed, stood a woman, hands on her hips, cursing furiously at a vegetable seller. Her face was flushed red with rage, spittle flying from her lips. That face, though haggard and aged, was still unmistakably familiar. It was Linda. In that instant, time seemed to overlap strangely. The last image I had seen before dying in my previous life had been her face, distorted to the extreme by jealousy. And now, here it was again. She was roaring, demanding to know why, yet now she was reduced to quarreling over a few wilted cabbage leaves, red-faced and shrill like a shrew in the marketplace. The scene was the same, the unwillingness just as fierce, but the main character had changed. Jason saw her too. He frowned, instinctively wanting to say something, but I gently shook my head. Then, calmly, I rolled up the car window, shutting out all the noise and ugliness outside. The car continued steadily forward, heading toward the sunlit countryside. I glanced at my gentle husband beside me and my lively, adorable son in the back seat. At last, the corners of my lips curved into a smile of true relief. In this life, I had finally broken free from that absurd fate. I was no longer someone's shadow, nor anyone's stepping stone. I had lived into myself.